And isn't the similarity with all these stories, like it doesn't matter if we're talking about the OKC bombing, the moon landing, whatever it may be, 9/11, that there's always a incentive for the government to get more power, scare us into like just giving up our freedoms, giving up our rights, giving up, power. And it all seems like that's what it is. That's what it's about. It's I mean, Chris Emery's here. He could talk a little more
Hey,
about.
Ricky.
Hey, how are you, Chris? Thanks for joining us about OKC bombing and Noble Eye, and of course, Massimo and Jason can talk about some of the laws, the Patriot Act, and some of the other things that happened with the spying and all that stuff that happened after September 11th. So it's just, and then you see it now with the COVID thing, right? It's like, oh, let's track you, to protect you. We want to track you so we can protect you, all this type of stuff. So you see, this is why this stuff is so important for people to learn, because if you're a teenager and you weren't alive, or you're very young during OKC or 9/11 or all these things, it's hard for you to see those patterns repeat over and over again. We're almost, I think, just about all of us are at that age where we can kind of put that together. I was actually born on April 19th, so the OKC bombing was always super fascinating to me because it happened on my birthday, and I remember being a kid and paranoid about, like, is something going to blow up on my birthday every year? But but yeah, so do you guys, do you think that's one of the reasons why this is so important to kind of remind ourselves and remind others that, like, hey, stuff like this isn't new. Stuff like this has happened before, and it's been used to to give up our rights.
Are you asking me?
Anybody, I guess.
I think so. General Parton, one of the experts that we interviewed in our film, by the way, thank you for having me on. And I want to do a shout out to Jason. Jason and I go way back. He inspired our crew to do the documentary on the Oklahoma City bombing. And I believe they were at least halfway through or through their third film on the Loose Change series at the time. So thank you, Jason.
It's good to see you, Chris. I haven't seen you in years. You look great.
Likewise, a little shorter on the hair, Jason. Looks good. Everybody's getting a little gray. No, you're looking awesome. But anyway, yeah, the Patriot Act. General Parton, one of the first things he told me when I visited him at his home in Alexandria, Virginia, was that the Patriot Act was not necessary at all. There was enough legislation. There were enough restrictions already in the congressional record and law many times over that it was just a political ploy by Bill Clinton and, of course, the subsequent administrations to really try to restrict their rights. And he was very upset about it, and he said it took a tailspin on our rights, and we would never ever be able to recover any of that after.
And of course, he was right, especially if you look at where we are today. I'm doing more and more vaccine passport stories. I did several on them today. I think Naomi Wolf, who I interviewed 12 years ago on her End of America documentary and book, has been really the most vocal person, at least on the left right now, and the most realistic person, and the easiest person to convey that this is not just about a quote-unquote vaccine or a virus, that anything can be uploaded to this, and it's very scalable. And I actually played a clip from Michael Smirkonish trying to now make the no shirt, no shoes, no service argument that's circulating around, even though that's not a medical record and absolutely absurd. Well, I'll never forget, I think Smirkonish was one of the first, and I actually played some of that earlier today, first guys I took on mainstream media. I was on MSNBC with him then. He's on CNN now. Both still big-time bootlickers, establishment propagators. And this fake news thing, it's not new. It's been going on for generations. I think we still have to fight it. There was a light at the end of the tunnel that I saw this week, actually, in the Daily Mail. It's probably the most fair article I've seen questioning 9/11 in the sense of the controlled demolition of the towers, Building 7, and on behalf of family members that are still bringing lawsuits almost 20 years later and demanding that the Attorney General in the United Kingdom relook at the evidence. And this article spent no time calling us kooks or cranks, and it was actually extremely powerful to the point where I read the entire thing top to bottom, kind of speaking to what you were saying, Ricky, how people don't understand how much trouble we're in right now if they don't understand 9/11, if they don't understand Oklahoma City, if they don't understand the World Trade Center bombing in 93, if they don't understand JFK or how we got into Vietnam. All these things are essential in letting people know that this is it. This is the takeover. This is the push. If your governor is not now willing to sign something into law like DeSantis, they have declared themselves the enemy. Make no mistake, that is where we are in this country and the world.
Well, I always say, I'm like, if they can shoot in broad daylight, the president, the elected president of the United States of America, like in broad daylight in front of people and cover it up, what the hell isn't possible? Like, why would anything else be hard to believe? Like, think about something like that happening in our time. I think it's easier to digest because it's historic. Like, you read about it, you didn't live it, you didn't see it. But, if you look at living through something like that, imagine if that happened today, it'd be chaos. It would be crazy. And then to find out that there was a possible cover up and there's a really shitty investigation, and then they took out the guy who shot the president, then they took out the guy who shot the guy who shot the president. It wouldn't even seem real. You're like, wait, there's no way this could be real,
Ricky, can I say like that, that whole scenario, the things get crazier and crazier, but it all rests on people believing like the mainstream media propaganda. And this is what I wanted to ask Massimo, who's saying like he makes these evidence-based documentaries like other people here. And yet when you just talk to normal people, they refuse to believe it because America's great or whatever. So I'm interested in your opinion, Massimo, of why does the media that comes through the mainstream media have such a more powerful impact? What is the psychology behind that? Or is it that they actually do psychological experiments on how to influence the public? I mean, did you get a sense of that when you're trying to break through those barriers with your stuff versus the shoddy stuff that is more convincing just because it comes through the big pipe?
I get it every day. Unfortunately, it's very frustrating. We here in Italy, for example, we have the same problem now with the COVID. We are about, I would say, 5 to 8% of Italians' population, maybe, who has really realized what's going on, the big scheme of the big reset that's going on with COVID. 90% of the people, and possibly even more, are totally bought into the mainstream version. I mean, mainstream media is called mainstream for a reason, because it's the main stream, it's the largest. So mainstream media represents and at the same time influences the thought of the majority of the people. And that's why they have a frame out of which nobody dares to step, so that provided you stay within those frames, you will always be mainstream. And for us who are outside, we had the internet and YouTube until yesterday, but now we're getting killed on YouTube. I get one video removed every other week because of medical disinformation. I'm actually showing just official documentations and putting A and B together, but of course they decide what they want, and because it doesn't match with what the OMS wants, then they just remove the video. So we don't even have that anymore. We're actually working now on a different platform. My son and I, my son basically is the technical guy. He's building a platform that's totally independent from any public server to host our own videos so that they cannot be taken down anymore. But I mean, up until a couple of years ago, it would have been relatively easy to fight back. Now with this new fake news thing, which has become the weapon for censorship, it's become very, very difficult. Not only is it frustrating to see the power that the mainstream media has over the majority of the people, but even our power, which is already 1/10 or even less, has been reduced day after day because of the censorship, especially on YouTube. I'm sure you guys have the same problems.
Let's get Ryan in here, because this is a perfect topic to get Ryan in here. Nobody's been censored quite as much as Ryan, has definitely of late. So Ryan, thank you for staying up, and you're not even in Italy. Massimo's, it's like 1 a.m. in Italy, and Ryan has a hard time staying up for our 7 o'clock show. But I'm just busting your balls. But Ryan, you want to fill us in about the extent that censorship will go?
Yeah. Well, fair. And thank you for having me on, guys. I should have been here 1,000 times before this, so I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's funny. I just on a side note that I actually accidentally put this on Tuesday, so I almost missed it. And then I thought it was 6 my time, so that's why I came in late. So it wasn't supposed to make it today either. So, but yeah, I mean, we don't need to spend too much time on my censorship. You know, there's so many people out there that have been censored. I'm sure everyone here to a degree has been censored. I have 2 YouTube channels been taken down, my entire Twitter, you know, Patreon, GoDaddy blocking my podcast. I mean, we all know what it's about. You know, they are. I just love Massimo's point there at the end about, you know, their just statement about going over scientific documentation, you know, just reviewing what it states and then pointing out what that means in contrast to the current narrative and how in the world that can be deemed anything other than just, you know, I mean, how can be deemed misinformation, let alone medical misinformation, is staggering.
So let me stop you for a second, Ryan. So I just finally did a video on the SPARS document, and this is yet another one of these war games that came out. And this is the 2020 version. So there's a 2017 version. This is a little more antiquated. It's only a 32-page document. 8 of that is citations. They actually go into a scenario where someone named EpiGirl, and I saw Whitney Webb on Tim Dillon's show talking about how she was basically able to aggregate information that was true and put it in a manner where you now doubted the mainstream media's narrative. Not that it was false. Well, guess what? This entire document, let me see if I can't just bring it up here for all you guys. We'll do it live.
We Last American Vat. Oh, did he just lose? Oh,
no, I'm here. Sorry. Keep going. No.
We covered the SPARS. I think Derek Brose wrote about that in 2020 November, I believe.
Yeah.
So he covered it's a pretty alarm. If you guys haven't seen that, I recommend you look into that because it's just another Event 201 style prediction. It's predicting something that will be coming. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so if you look at it here, this is basically, and what we'll do is we'll bring it up nice and big so everyone can see it. This person, EpiGirl, I'm sorry, we'll have to do this one. Sorry. So EpiGirl is now this social media influencer, and she's taking actual VAERS data, CDC and FDA information, and this is a COVID-like thing, and basically because her stuff is better, the government attempted to respond to these claims through formal press releases, but these were neither as visually appealing nor as interactive as EpiGirl's maps were, therefore largely ignored. So in other words, she did it better than them. And then the other point to make, let's see, is that they basically say it's not just misinformation, it's doubt. So responding to misinformation or doubt. So you basically can make a better argument based on the available science and cause doubt in the mainstream narrative. And now that also has to be censored. This is an incredible document.
Right. And the crazier part about that, Jason, to point out about is that what Jason is reading is a is a document, like think of it like Event 201. So what blows me away is that they're documenting in their hypothetical situation how they're choosing to manipulate genuine coverage because it creates doubt. So they're stating for us, they'll hide the truth if it creates vaccine hesitancy or however they want to frame it. That's not even a hidden concept today. It's just, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, no, it happened to Whitney. That's why she got booted from Patreon.
Yeah.
Yep.
The email said, well, first it was like, here's an example of the misinformation and it's blank. And then when they finally kick her off of Patreon, they tell her like it's not that it's misinformation, but it could cause doubt in people, and that's that was Patreon's official reason.
Specifically, what they said, we covered this in the interview.
Yeah.
They basically broke it down to say, well, you're allowed to discuss this. That's fine, right? To talk about it all you want, but you can't spread medical misinformation. And so the point was, when does discussing something become misinformation? It's clear when you source it. When you source that material and show the documentation and state it and talk about it, well, that's not allowed. But if you just discuss it, that's okay. Right. So they made that very clear. They don't like when you prove what you're saying, not on Patreon.
But there's an actual clip from the director of the CEO of YouTube, which we ran a few months ago. We found out. You probably all have seen it too. When she said, she's interviewed, I think, by CNN, and she says clearly, we will censor and we will remove any content that does not match with the WHO directives. So anything you say that is against whatever WHO said would be automatically removed. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not. So WHO is controlled in large part by Bill Gates. WHO now, WHO, OMS in Italian, World Health Organization. Yeah, WHO. WHO controls YouTube. So basically, Bill Gates decides what we can say and not say on YouTube.
And you know what's even crazier on top of that is that the WHO has stated more than once that they don't recommend lockdowns for the primary source of, containing whatever. And yet all these governments are doing that as their primary source of control. So who is not allowed to challenge the WHO? Just people covering what's happening today, right? It's counterintuitive across the board. It's ridiculous.
Well, another thing in this SPARS document is they want to do models because it takes place between 2025 and 2028. And one of those models, the ideal model, is a UN-based society. So in other words, if you're the UN model, then everything's gravy and it's the best thing since breakfast. Now, instead, they chose a quote-unquote echo chamber model where we're more divided than ever, okay? And it's pretty crazy when you read it because they also say that this virus, which is almost identical to COVID-19, except for it has a high mortality rate in children as well as another motivator, okay, is that it's caused by climate change. And it's another zootroponic disease. So in other words, bat, pangolin, horse, fist in your ass, whatever, whatever anybody wants to believe. But it doesn't come from a lab or anything like that. It's nuts because it also sets up a compensation fund via the government. And it says that these kids get neurological disorders, but when the lawsuits come, they have so much money that they can buy off the parents. And instead of white supremacy, they're actually concerned with African Americans. They name Tuskegee by name, but also Muslims. And isn't convenient that this attack on our now militarized capital with a zombie in office that's not awake 4 hours a day is a militant black Muslim who's associated with black supremacist Louis Farrakhan. So no, it gives them an out on their equity as well. Now, because now if you're a bow tie Muslim, you're just as bad as the white supremacists, and we're allowed to say that because you charge the capital. Just food for thought.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why all these events are kind of similar. Because I mean, you look at the things like 9/11. Obviously, there's documents that what was going to happen happened. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the CDC investigation by Full Measure, but it was a real interest when the CDC basically got caught lying. This representatives started recording the phone calls with the CDC because they were basically telling people that even if you had COVID, you should still get the vaccine. And he's like, well, that's not right. There's no scientific evidence that even makes any sense that it would be useful at all if you already had the virus.
Also, risk. Also added risks, they said from the beginning, if you shouldn't take it while you were possibly
exactly
sick.
Yeah.
Beginning.
So he started recording the phone calls, and Full Measure has it, of the CDC representatives actually saying like, yeah, you're right, there isn't any scientific evidence, we shouldn't be recommending that, we'll take that down. Then like weeks go by, he calls them again. Then the representative he talked to, who is apologizing, like 2 days later does an interview on some public news or whatever, some mainstream media, and starts basically just doing the same thing of like suggesting that, yes, if you've already got the virus, you should still get the vaccine. And he's like, okay, now it's not a mistake. Now it's just like they're blatantly lying. And it's just like, I mean, obviously we don't need more evidence, but some people do. I mean, some people need it. It's like, people think the CDC, you can trust the CDC. They think you can trust the WHO. They, it's like, how much more evidence do you need? I'm like Massimo, where it's like, if you don't want the information out, if you're not convinced yet, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to convince you. Like, to me, it's just almost so obvious. Like, what else do you need?
Ricky, you got to realize, I'm sorry, but today on this CNN clip, they had a representative from IBM talking about a trust triangle, okay, with their new COVID pass. The irony of the fact that IBM, an American company, helped exterminate not only Jews, not only gypsies, not only the mentally handicapped, but also dissidents with their first calculation machines, and nobody went to jail. Nobody was part of the Nuremberg trials. None of that happened. No one was held accountable. It didn't come out until I believe it was the late 80s, early 90s through Edwin Black's research. Should be extremely alarming that the same people that want your trust triangle literally less than a generation ago helped exterminate an entire class of people with the Nazis. That's how hardcore this is. And now we're on a digital trail of tyranny where it's over. The Track Trace Database Society's already been here. This is the takeover. This is the medical martial law tyranny of total control, my friend.